Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive.
Always. What are we looking at today?
Today we're tackling Operation Flipper, a World War II commando raid. A really daring one that, well, let's just say it didn't exactly go as planned.
Those are always the interesting ones, aren't they, where things went wrong?
Exactly. And we've got some great sources for this one. Personal accounts from the guys who were there, official military records, even some declassified intelligence reports.
Oh, intelligence reports. So we can get into the nitty-gritty of the decision-making, too, not just what happened on the ground.
Absolutely. We're going to try and piece together the whole picture, why they decided to do it, what went wrong, and the impact it all had.
Sounds like a puzzle, putting all those pieces together from different perspectives.
Exactly. So picture this. North Africa, 1941. Big British offensive going on, trying to break the Axis siege of Tobruk. It was called Operation Crusader.
Right. Huge operation. Lots at stake.
And on the other side, leading the defense, you've got Erwin Rommel.
The Desert Fox. Legendary commander.
Exactly. And that's where things start to get a little murky. Our sources don't quite agree on whether Rommel himself was actually the main target of Operation Flipper.
Oh, that's interesting. You'd think that would be pretty clear-cut. Attack a high-value target like Rommel, disrupt the enemy command structure, makes sense.
Right. You'd think so.
Right.
But some accounts say, yeah, they were absolutely going after Rommel.
Yeah.
Capture him, kill him, whatever they could, believed it would really cripple the Axis war effort.
But then other sources make it sound like their objective was more about, well, just causing chaos. Attacking headquarters, disrupting communication lines, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Makes you wonder, what was so important about the building they thought was Rommel's HQ? If it wasn't necessarily about getting Rommel himself, why attack that specific spot?
Yeah, good question. And that's something we're going to have to keep in mind as we go through all this. Might be a more complex answer than it first appears.
Okay, so we've got this audacious raid in the works. Let's talk about the guy in charge. Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Keyes.
Now, he's a fascinating character. Son of a famous war hero, Admiral Sir Roger Keyes. Big shoes to fill.
Yeah, that kind of legacy can be a blessing and a curse, can it?
Absolutely. Adds a whole layer of pressure. Plus, Keyes himself had some personal challenges. Hearing problems wasn't great with his vision either. Things that, well, they play a role in how this whole thing unfolds, unfortunately.
Okay, so maybe a bit more to him than meets the eye. And he's leading this team of, well, they weren't your average soldiers, were they?
Oh, no, not at all. This was a hand-picked group. Guys from the long-range desert group, experts at stealth, operating behind enemy lines.
LRGG. Those guys were tough.
Tough as nails. And you also had volunteers from different special forces units, even some of the desert rats, skilled in sabotage and desert survival.
Sounds like a pretty diverse bunch, each with their own expertise.
Yeah.
So what was the plan? How are they supposed to pull this off?
Well, their orders were, to put it mildly, ambitious. Sneak into enemy territory, hit what they believe to be Rommel's headquarters, cause as much disruption as possible, and, oh yeah, if the opportunity presented itself, capture or eliminate Rommel himself.
Wow, that's a tall order for any group, even the best.
Right, and here's where things get really interesting, maybe even a little frustrating. The whole plan, the entire operation, hinged on some bad intel, seriously flawed intelligence.
Okay, how so?
Well, a British captain, John Haselden, had been doing some recon work, disguised as an Arab trying to blend in. He reported seeing what he thought was Rommel's staff car at a building in Beta Litoria.
So they're basing an entire mission, risking all these men on one sighting of a car.
Pretty much. And get this, Rommel wasn't even in Africa at the time of the raid?
Wait, what? He wasn't even there.
Nope. Gone. Headed back to Rome to celebrate his birthday on November 1st.
So Keyes and his team are about to launch this incredibly dangerous raid, and the whole thing is based on a case of mistaken identity.
Yeah, pretty much. They're walking into a situation far riskier than they realize, all because of this bad intel. And it's going to have a domino effect on everything that happens next.
This is already feeling like a tense thriller. We know what's coming, but they don't.
It's a good reminder, isn't it, how even the best laid plans, the most skilled soldiers, can be completely undone by bad information.
So last time we left Keyes and his team trekking across the desert, heading toward what they thought was Rommel's HQ, we know it wasn't, which just makes everything even more, well, tense.
Oh, absolutely. Knowing what we know now, it's like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You want to shout a warning, but you can't.
Exactly. So how does the raid actually go down? I mean, given everything we know, it can't have gone well, right?
You're right about that. Nothing goes according to plan. It all starts with their landing, middle of the night, from 2 submarines, the Torbay and the Talisman. Can you imagine? Crammed in these tiny subs, waiting to go into action.
I can only imagine, yeah.
Yeah.
Must have been claustrophobic, to say the least.
But even that, the landing, it's a mess. Rough seas, pitch black. These guys are trying to get ashore in inflatable boats. Some of them capsize. It's just chaos.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare scenario right from the start.
Totally. And right away, they're hit with setbacks. Men lost at sea, equipment damage. Only about half the force actually makes it to shore.
Wow, so they're already behind schedule, down men, facing a much tougher fight than they expected. What did Keyes do?
Well, he's got a choice. Abort the mission or push on with what he's got. And remember, there's pressure to coordinate this raid with the larger offensive, Operation Crusader. They can't just sit around waiting.
So he decides to go for it.
He does. They head inland, following a local Arab guide who's supposed to lead them to the target building. But even this part of the story, it's a bit murky.
How so?
Well, some sources suggest this guide might have been, well, unreliable, maybe even working for the Germans, intentionally leading them astray.
Hold on, so they might have a compromised guide. On top of everything else, this just gets worse and worse.
It does. So picture this. You're one of these commandos, exhausted from the landing, unsure of your surroundings, not even sure if you can trust the guy leading you.
I'm getting stressed just thinking about it.
And then, after hours of trekking through the desert, they finally reach this building in Beta Latoria, their target.
Okay, they're at the supposed HQ. What happens next?
They try to be sneaky about it. Captain Campbell spoke fluent German, goes to the front door, knocks, pretends to be a German officer demanding entry.
They knocked on the door. I thought this was a commando raid.
Right. Sounds crazy, but that was the plan. Deception, get inside without raising the alarm. Problem is, it backfires immediately. As the sentry opens the door, Sergeant Terry tries to stab him, only manages to tear his jacket. Sentry starts shouting, all hell breaks loose. Campbell's forced to shoot him.
Well, so much for stealth.
It's pandemonium from that point on. Gunfire, Keyes, and Campbell rush inside, frantically searching for Rommel, who, of course, isn't there.
It's crazy to think. They have no idea they're searching for a ghost. Their whole understanding of the situation is just wrong.
Right. And it's here that Keyes' those problems with his hearing and vision, they come into play.
In a bad way, I'm guessing.
Tragically, yes. Amidst all the chaos, he's fatally wounded. Still debated today whether it was enemy fire or, and this is even more heartbreaking, friendly fire. Either way, the commander's down, the mission's falling apart.
So what about the rest of the team? Do they escape?
Campbell, despite being wounded himself, takes over, orders a retreat. They grab Campbell, flee the building. Now they got to cover something like 30 kilometers on foot through enemy territory, all while avoiding German patrols.
Hey, man, talk about a desperate situation.
Yeah.
Exhausted, wounded, the enemy's on your tail.
It was a nightmare. And some of their stories of survival are unbelievable. Laycock, the overall commander of the whole operation, and Sergeant Terry, they managed to evade capture for 37 days, using their desert survival skills. Just incredible.
37 days, hiding out in the desert.
Wow. Yeah. Testament to their toughness, their will to survive. But they weren't the only ones. Bombardier John Brittlebank from the Special Boat Section, he survives alone for 40 days in the desert.
That's almost superhuman. What kept these guys going?
Who knows? Training, instinct, sheer determination. They knew capture meant a German POW camp at best. But sadly, most of them didn't make it. Out of the 32 commandos who landed, only Laycock and Terry get back to British lines.
A tragic end to what was really a doomed mission from the start.
And the story doesn't end there. This raid, Operation Flipper, it had these lasting repercussions. Not just the casualties, but the controversy that followed.
You're talking about Keyes' Victoria Cross, right?
Yeah.
The award he got posthumously for his actions during the raid.
Yeah, that's it. And that's where things get even more complicated.
We've been talking about Operation Flipper, all the things that went wrong, the bad intel, the landing, the tragic loss of life. But it doesn't end there, does it? There's this whole aftermath, these questions that linger.
Right. The failure of the raid, it shook things up back in Britain. People started questioning the intelligence gathering, the decision-making, the whole chain of command. But there's one specific thing that really stands out, something that's been debated for decades. Keyes' Victoria Cross.
Yeah. It's one thing to talk about strategy, military objectives, but this is where the human side of it really hits home. Real lives were lost. And then you have this award. given after death, and it's surrounded by all this controversy.
The Victoria Cross, it's the highest military honor in the British Commonwealth. To get one, it's a huge deal. But with Keyes, well, circumstances are, let's just say, unusual.
Unusual how?
Well, the citation, the official write-up that explains why he deserved the award, it was written by Robert Laycock, the overall commander of the operation. But here's the thing, Laycock wasn't actually there during the raid on the headquarters.
He wasn't.
Nope. And that goes against standard military protocol. Usually you need an eyewitness account from a superior officer, someone who was actually there, saw what happened.
So right away, there's this question mark hanging over the whole thing.
Exactly. And it gets even more complicated. Many of the details in Laycock's citation, you can't verify them. Some of them even contradict what the surviving commandos, the guys who were actually there, said happened.
Wow. So you've got these conflicting accounts. Makes you wonder what Laycock was thinking when he wrote that citation. Was he trying to, I don't know, make Keyes look good, maybe boost morale after such a disastrous mission, or even cover up some of the mistakes that were made?
It's possible. We can't know for sure what was going on in his head, but it shows how complex history is. We have to remember, even primary sources, eyewitness accounts, they can be biased. They're influenced by all sorts of things.
Yeah, it's not as simple as just reading a document and taking it at face value. There's always more to the story.
Right. And with Operation Flipper, this whole debate about Keyes' Victoria Cross, it kind of mirrors the bigger questions about the operation itself. Was it poorly planned from the start? Was it reckless to go ahead with it, even after they knew the intel was bad?
And if Rommel wasn't the real target, what were they after? Just disruption? Was it some kind of diversion? Or something else entirely? We've explored a lot of possibilities, but it's still unclear.
That's how it goes sometimes. Some historical mysteries, you just don't get a neat and tidy answer. But that doesn't mean we stop digging, We keep trying to understand what motivated these people, what decisions they made, the cost of those decisions.
It's the human stories that always get to me. These weren't just names on a report. These were real people with families, hopes, dreams. And their sacrifices, recognized or not, they deserve to be remembered.
Absolutely. Operation Flipper, with all its flaws and controversies, it reminds us that history is about people. It's about the choices they make, the consequences of those choices, how they ripple out, how they affect everyone.
And even though this deep dive, it's raised more questions than answers, I think it's also shown how important it is to think critically, to question what we think we know, to accept that the past is messy, complicated.
That's the best we can do, right? Keep learning, keep questioning. History isn't just about memorizing dates and names. It's about constantly trying to understand, putting the pieces together, knowing that our understanding might change as we find new information.
So to everyone listening, Operation Flipper, it was a bold mission, a tragedy, but it still has so much to teach us. About leadership, about intelligence, about the very nature of war. Keep digging into those sources, consider all the different perspectives, and come to your own conclusions. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.